Now open Mary, Our Lady of Peace Mausoleum in Flushing, New York. Secure your family's future with 10% down, no taxes, and 0% interest financing for up to 10 years on pre-need crypts and cremation niches starting at just $25 per month. Protect your loved ones with the gift of pre-planning. Visit them today at Mount St. Mary Cemetery. Call 718-353-1560. That's 718-353-1560 or go to ccbklyn.org to learn more. That's ccbklyn.org.
Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby.
I don't believe we're on the eve of destruction.
Well, a lot of things are happening. Are we on the eve of destruction? In the studio today with us is Governor George Pataki, where we have Craig Eaton, a famous lawyer from Brooklyn and all of New York City, and he was 10 years the GOP chairman of Brooklyn, and Judge Richard Weinberg, a common sense Democrat, and me and Rita. Where are we on the eve of destruction?
I think we are. Everybody's waiting to see what happens. The world is literally on fire, John, after close to 200 missiles lobbed by Iran at Israel. And now what is Israel going to do next? Kamala said the world was calm. No troops are in harm's way. Wow, was that a doozy?
The question is it Act 3, Scene 1?
Yeah, explain.
181 missiles, nobody died.
Yeah, it sounds like the last one, remember?
So Netanyahu says there's going to be a change in regimes in Iran. Iran panics, makes a deal. He says, we're going to fire the missiles, but we don't want to kill anybody because we don't want to escalate. So I don't know what is the truth. I don't know what the truth is. And if Israel retaliates, will it be Act 4?
Well, and
Scene 1.
And John, here's another.
I'll go to the panel.
Yeah.
Governor Pataki.
But before Governor, I just want to tell you one thing that came out. This is interesting. The White House came out and admitted that they got the tip off from Iran through channels, obviously not directly, that they were told this was going to happen, John. And also Russia was told. So they got a forewarning too, which is interesting.
Yes, it is interesting. I think Israel has been enormously successful in isolating Iran. It seemed like a year ago, Israel was isolated and you had Hamas, Hezbollah, Turkey rattling sabers, Iran being the global superpower in the region. And now it's completely reversed. And if I'm in the Iranian Ayatollah's governing clique, I'm thinking we're in trouble here. You know, and yes, we have to pretend we have to do something because we lose all face if we don't. But if it's ineffective, that's okay. What we don't want is Israel coming after us. And I think they are terrified of that. And I think because of that, their attack has been, and also the fact that Israel has such tremendous defense capability, that Iran has really been ineffective, but symbolically attacking Israel.
You know, the big question is, will they take out the supreme leader? That's the big thing, because Netanyahu just said he's calling for regime change. But his idea of regime change, as we saw with Nasrallah, was take him out, and with Hamas too. And if I'm Israel and I'm thinking maybe there's a chance Kamala gets into the White House in November, I want to strike now, because this White House has been weak on Israel every single turn.
Absolutely. Everything Israel did to destroy Hamas and now marginalize Hezbollah, the Biden-Harris administration has opposed it the whole way through. So you are absolutely right, Rita.
Craig Eaton, your thoughts?
Yeah, you know, it's an opportunity right now. There's weakness in Washington. They know that there's a potential for Trump to win again. And if Trump gets in again, they're not going to have any opportunity. So they're all looking to, you know, escalate the opportunities that they have and take advantage of them now.
I had a long talk with Sid this morning, and the problem is Joe Biden and hates what happened to him. It was a coup in the United States of America, and nobody's talking about it. Nancy Pelosi and whoever, President Obama, they're saying, and I don't know exactly who it is, but they convinced him.
Yeah.
They convinced the President of the United States, and you know what they said to him?
25th Amendment.
No, we're going to take you out, and you're not going to like it the way we take you out, and you're going to go down in history as crap, or you agree not to run.
And the vehicle for that, John, is the 25th Amendment.
Yeah, and Joe Biden hates the people that did that to him. Jill Biden hates the people that did that to him. And guess what? This strike that we're having.
The port strike.
The port strike we're having, it's a strike of a pen. We could have put it off, the Taft-Hartley Act, the President of the United States could put it off for 60 days. It's only 35 days to the election. So what does that mean?
Yeah,
you know what that means?
It's an interesting point.
It's an interesting point. Yeah.
It means that Kamala Harris is not on his Christmas list.
Yeah. And it means that we're going to suffer. And John, you know this all too well.
The only place, by the way, I'm just telling our listeners, the only place that you will hear these revelations is on WABC.
Yeah.
Nobody else is going to tell you the truth.
Now,
Except if you're a guest on somebody else's show.
Yeah, but now before you go further.
I told the truth on Greg Kelly's show today. I told the truth on Sid Rosenberg's show today.
And where were you yesterday?
It's going to be there today.
And I don't get paid overtime.
Well, you should be. We'll give you a raise. Judge, we can work on it, right? We can give him a raise. I want to ask you, though, John, from an economic standpoint, because you just hit on an interesting point. This strike...
$5 billion. It's going to cost $5 billion
a day. So explain to people what that means from their pocketbooks. By the way, in one of the buildings we're building, my people just told me that we got enough windows for the next 2 weeks, but the windows to finish the building on one of these boats are waiting out there. Wow. So what does that mean to the consumer who goes to the grocery store? Everything comes by ship.
Hey, it's going to mean higher food prices.
It's going to mean higher prices, and it's going to mean shortages. You were just talking about the windows, John.
Yes, it's going to be shortages.
I've been working on a project for 12 years for energy in upstate New York. The project's under construction. They have to shut down next week because they're not able, because of the strike, to continue. So it's going to be higher prices, shortages, and layoffs.
And you got the holidays coming, too, you guys. Let's not forget about that.
By the way, me and George Pataki, the governor, has to have a discussion someday, because with all the stuff they're doing in New York State, we're not going to have enough power unless certain things happen.
Absolutely right.
Wow. And by the way, I want to remind everybody, of course, the big vice presidential debate is going to be happening. This is going to be, think about the issues on the table. And we are going to have great coverage here on WABC starting at 8:30 p.m.
Till midnight. I'm not sure I'm going to make it to midnight.
We'll keep you awake.
Professor Dershowitz is on. He's 5'10". Let's do it.
Let's go to it. Professor Alan Dershowitz. Boy, oh boy, we can't wait to get your reaction to what happened today by Iran against Israel. Your thoughts?
First of all, Iran wanted to hurt Israel. It wasn't that they just sent up firecrackers. They sent up, almost 200 of these very, very sophisticated missiles aiming at civilian targets. It's just, the technology and the cooperation between Israel and the United States that made a miss, but it wasn't a deliberate miss.
200 misses?
I'm with Professor Dershowitz.
Listen, the American people are not that dumb to believe that.
I'm with Professor Dershowitz. They want to do harm.
Jericho. They wanted to do harm. They didn't care how much or how little harm they did. But this provides Israel with the perfect opportunity to either effectuate regime change, which they can bring about, and which the entire Arab world would support. I mean, there'd be cheers in Saudi Arabia. There'd be cheers in Iran. There would be cheers all over.
But Professor,
the mullah put out of power. Yeah,
the mullah might have a firecracker in his toilet and is afraid of that firecracker in case some of those missiles actually hit.
Yeah,
and he's just trying to pacify his own people.
There's no question. The other possibility is to use it as a justification for destroying or at least setting back Iran's nuclear program for another 10 years, because that's the only existential threat that's faced in the Middle East. Israel has the perfect right. They were attacked. They have a perfect right to respond by taking out the nuclear program, by taking out their oil refineries, their oil export facilities, and by taking out the mullahs, and give the Iranian people the power to govern themselves, to institute a democracy. The Iranian people are great people, and they are Western-oriented, and many of them are secular. And they would applaud the end of this regime, and Israel can bring it about. Now, they'd be condemned. Of course, the United Nations would condemn them, but quietly behind the scenes, many of the people who would vote to condemn Israel would be praising them for bringing about a result that helps peace in the Middle East and helps liberty and security. Particularly the women of the Middle East would be thrilled if they can no longer have to go to jail for not wearing the right religious garb. And so it would be a win-win-win for everybody if Iran lost its supreme leader and lost its governing authority, and democracy could come to Iran for the first time. Look, they didn't have it under the Shah. They had it better under the Shah than they have it now. But having a real democracy in the Middle East, these are people who are ready for a democracy, and I think they would applaud Israel, condemn them publicly, and applaud them privately. We already see that when Nasrallah was killed.
Absolutely.
There were cheers from some people,
Professor,
who were saying, it's so important to get rid of Hezbollah. They have destroyed Lebanon. Lebanon was a great country. It
Absolutely.
had a very significant number of Christians, all of whom have been forced to leave. And now it's under the auspices of a terrorist group that is making life miserable, just the way Gaza has been made miserable by Hamas. If you can get rid of Hamas and Hezbollah, the people of Gaza, the people of Lebanon, I think the people of Yemen would love also to get rid of the Houthis.
Yeah, for sure.
Iran,
Professor Dershowitz.
Great villain of the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let me bring in Governor Pataki.
Professor, a simple question. You said Israel, and I believe you're right, has both the legal authority since they were attacked and the military means to bring about these changes in Iran. Do you think they will actually try to do that?
It depends on the United States. The Israeli cabinet, was meeting today, and of course they would love to do this. And the Israeli military, I think, for the first time, has said this is an appropriate time to do it. But if the United States says, we won't let you do it, we will withhold arms. Israel it's not a vassal state; it's an independent state, but it can't do something that the United States has said categorically we don't want you to do. So the question is, what message the United States sends to Israel? I hope it sends a message. Don't ask, don't tell, just do it, and we won't attack you, we won't condemn you. That's the message that if Israel got that, I think they would go ahead and conduct the kind of attack that would help bring about peace in the region and peace in the world and rights to all the people of the Middle East, not just the people that the mullahs want to see have rights.
Well, I think you're right that if they got that just yellow light, the Israelis would be inclined to go ahead. But I fear that under Biden-Harris, they're far more likely to get a red light. I hope that doesn't happen, but I think that's most likely.
I think it's much more likely under Harris than under Biden, which is why Israel may just bite the bullet and say, look, we have another few weeks. We can do it now. We'll get condemned, but we won't get condemned as harshly. Biden threatens. But the fear is that Harris would actually carry through with a policy of disarming Israel, of not giving them the kinds of munitions and weapons that were used today and that are necessary for the defense of Israel. So I think this period between now and November 5th is a period that Israel may see as an opportunity to do things that they couldn't see afterward if Harris were elected.
Well, Professor, let's hope we have a happy New Year. Because
happy New Year to everybody. You don't have to be Jewish to celebrate a New Year. So Shana Tova to everybody, whatever your religion or non-religion. And
we celebrate everything here.
We celebrate everything. And, I was at an event recently with cats, and I think every religion was represented there. The array of religious garb, it was so beautiful to see, the Greek, the Serbian, the Italian, every group was represented and by their religious leaders, and you've done a phenomenal job bringing people together.
So thank you for being there, and I'm glad we were together. But certain people didn't like my speech.
I liked your speech. How have you not liked your speech? I like your speech.
Certain people.
Oh, I don't know why you keep looking at me.
Thank you, Professor. And thank you. We'll talk again soon. Let's pray for people's safety.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you.
All right, Rita, let's bring in...
We've got Mark Penn.
Mark Penn, what the heck is going on? What's going to happen with the debate?
Yeah, Mark, what do you anticipate is going to happen tonight? I believe this could be one of the most consequential vice presidential debates given the dynamics. Go ahead.
Well, you can choose. It's a dog fight. It's a wrestling match. It's a cockfight. I mean, I just think that this is going to be, I think they're going to come out of the gate. And I would be surprised if they weren't really going at each other for 90 minutes.
Well, and we were talking before the show. If I'm J.D. Vance, I would look straight at Tim Walz and I would say the world's on fire tonight. Look at what's happening with Russia, Ukraine. Look at this moment where we just saw Iran raining down missiles on Israel, and your weak policies have contributed directly to it. Your bosses, Kamala Harris, you owe the world an apology. That would be my first statement, my opening statement.
Yeah, that would be strong. I mean, once upon a time I did a 3 a.m. ad, and certainly this is the kind of circumstance now, I think, where foreign affairs and who's a stronger commander-in-chief could play a bigger role in this election. And you're right, we'll see whether or not. Now, these campaigns have been pretty steadfast at keeping to domestic issues, because they know that these our U.S. voters are so U.S.-centric. But sometimes when events like this happen, it thrusts foreign affairs into a more central role.
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting because you're right. I mean, it was economy. Obviously, it was border we saw on so many issues. I think, though, it's interesting, Mark. I feel tonight, and I'm curious your thoughts, that Vance sort of has a double duty, obviously. He's got to, first and foremost, obviously go after Kamala Harris's record, but his own record will also be under attack. He's sort of got the double duty. In many ways, it's tougher, I think, sometimes for the VP in this case. And I'm saying it obviously on Tim Walz. And boy, is there a lot of material on Tim Walz. I mean, you could not see sort of two different people. One was saying Minneapolis shouldn't burn, and the other and his wife were applauding it.
Well, I think, too, the big question is Vance going to go after his military record, or which of course Walz will be completely prepared for with some kind of retort that they've worked up in debate prep, or is he going to stay away from that because he knows it's going to get such a violent reaction that it's a little unpredictable whether you win or not. So I think that's, and I do think he's definitely going to go after the weak on crime. But, it's interesting. I think both of these candidates are very capable debaters, and we're going to see a show very different from the last two, because both of these are, I think, very verbally talented and able to maneuver and explain things, in ways that in some ways the presidential candidates can't.
And also open mics too. This I think is different because this time they will have open mics so they can talk over each other. And Tim Walz may start with his whole, the circle back sake, I call it, which is what Kamala does well. It's going to be interesting if Vance can get him in a corner like a rope-a-dope, if you will, if you're boxing, because he's going to try to kind of keep coming out of the corner. And he's going to have to force, I also think the moderators, too, will play a big role, as they certainly did last time, 3 against 1.
Well, that's where it's going to be interesting to see if they start doing the same thing and start, correcting Vance and say, because obviously these new immigration statistics that most people haven't heard, but then what time period do they cover? But it really doesn't matter, even if it covers a longer time period. Most of the entrants were really in the last couple of years because the number of people coming in went up threefold. So it'll be interesting to see if Vance is clearly going to say 500,000 criminals let in the country, and then we're going to see whether the moderators say, "Oh no, that's not true. That doesn't cover," or whether or not they require Walz to refute or not refute, the accuracy of that charge.
What would you ask, Mark? I also would, if I were a moderator, I've moderated a number of debates, I would also say to Walz, do you condemn the protesters out there carrying Hamas flags? I want to have him say something that he doesn't want to answer, because he's not going to want to alienate that base. And you can't do, sort of a spin around. That's going to be the key. And if the moderators don't do it, Vance is going to have to do it.
Well, I came from a middle-class family.
And you're holistic, right? You've got a holistic approach.
Mark, this is George Pataki. Let me just barge in here for a minute. My understanding, you know better than me, but my understanding is that almost no one makes a decision on the presidential level based on the vice presidential candidate. They vote for the president. And to me, that means that, while Vance has a lot of ammunition to go after Waltz, is that misfiring? Should he not be going after Harris? Talking about all the things she said that were wrong during the course of the debate, fact-checking her, as opposed to going after Waltz's record.
Well, I agree with you primarily. What's interesting about this is we have not seen two articulate debaters argue their cases in front of the American public the way that these two could. And so if Vance, who has really proven to be quite strong in interviews, can really articulate the case for Trump versus Harris, particularly in the context of inflation, immigration, and a world on fire, that probably is the job one. And I think job two, because everybody, loves the fights, job two is going to be some back and forth here and pushing back and forth on some of this stuff. But what I really think the value of the debate will be is really putting the case in a way that people can say, that makes sense. I can understand now why I'm voting one way or the other.
Great points. Mark Penn, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Really powerful. We'll see. And again, our coverage gets underway at 8:30 here on WABC Radio.
Okay, let's take a break right now. And we're going to come back with General John Teichert, otherwise known as Dragon. And we're going to see what his opinion is of all these missiles going off.
New Life Center NYC is a leading integrative med spa on beautiful Madison Avenue in the heart of New York City. New Life Center has been championing ageless living for over 25 years. Their expert team will design a personalized health and wellness program just for you, using cutting-edge technologies and specialized supplements. Experience the future of medicine at New Life Center. Call 917-723-8933 now to book your appointment. That's 917-723-8933. Call now to discover ageless living at New Life Center NYC.
Other realtors have vacant homes. At Pest Properties, ours come occupied and ready to invest. Looking to relocate your larvae? Try the Petrie Residence. This rustic home features thousands of crevices to squirm in through, vaulted ceilings for our wall crawlers, and an outdoor bird bath teeming with mosquito eggs. So kick up your 6 hairy legs and sign today.
Before pests move in, Terminix it. With over 95 years of experience, we'll help keep your home off the pest market. Visit Terminix.com today.
Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is pushing back against that tide. They make high-quality clothing for a summer wardrobe you'll love, all made right here in the USA. Support America's workers and get 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with code STAPLE20. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, code STAPLE20.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
Wow, with us today is General John Teichert, otherwise known as Dragon, a Brigadier General in Space Force. General, tell us, is it possible to fire 200 missiles and not hit anybody?
John and Rita, thanks for having me. And it's pretty amazing to understand the layered defense that Israel enjoys alongside of the United States. And literally, it seems like only one person was killed in this attack. And ironically, it was a Palestinian in the West Bank. But that is how effective Israel and the United States are in this thing called missile defense.
Well, I'm happy to hear that because we thought it was a Hollywood movie made all over again.
It almost seems like it, but the technology is so advanced, especially with that type of precursor warning, that we, the United States and Israel, were able to weave our defenses together in order to essentially neutralize that 200 missile volley that they saw coming at them a couple hours ago.
This morning, Netanyahu was saying that there's going to be a regime change in Iran, in his opinion. So the Iranians have to do something to save face.
Well, I think that they did indeed attack out of trying to save face or out of pride. But now Israel, similarly, to maintain their credibility, has to do something that is a strong indication of their strength. And that likely means at some point at the time and place of their choosing, striking targets in Iran.
Wow.
I am sure that the Iranian mullahs are scared stiff. One of them went to a special hiding place.
Yeah, the supreme leader. The supreme leader.
Because they're afraid of having a firecracker in their toilet.
Well, it's true. And you think about how Israel has proven that they can strike targets at will, including in Iran, like they did the Hamas leader in Tehran back in July. And it is true that Iran cannot similarly do that to Israel. That's why it was so foolish, but it was done out of pride that Iran had to attack today. But when Israel strikes back, they're not going to miss.
So let me ask you, General Teichert, how is Israel going to respond? I sort of see it, and maybe there's more options, going after the supreme leader, whether it's in his toilet or not. The other is obviously the option of going after the nuclear sites. They came really close last time. They hit the airfield saying, we can get you. Here's a warning. Or going after their oil fields. What do you think they will do?
I think this next step would be wise to strike an economic target like an oil field or a port, with a very strong leader warning that the supreme leader is next. And hopefully that would cause Iran to back down and not continue this cycle of escalation that we saw started to some extent today.
Do they have a small window to act? I mean, look at, I'll tell you one thing that was stunning to me today. As the daughter of a Polish resistance fighter, the Germans came out and had a stronger message condemning Iran than America did. Think about that. Think about what that means historically. That's stunning. This White House has been so weak and so flip-floppy on Israel. Don't you think they have a very narrow window to act? And as John brought up, regime change can mean a lot of things. In other words, getting rid of the supreme leader, if you're ever going to do it, is it a narrow window to really go for it? They've done it on other levels, getting rid of Hamas, the leader and head of Hezbollah recently.
Well, I do agree that America has been downright weak during the last year in its support of Israel. But I do think that Israel can bide their time a little bit and maybe strike some of those military or economic targets in a way that would really prove to Iran that Israel has something that Iran doesn't, which is the capability to strike at will anywhere in the other's country.
Judge Weinberg.
General, good to talk to you again. It seems to me that everybody's talking about this is Israel's fight. This is not Israel's fight. This is Israel defending Western civilization. And there's a great column in the Wall Street Journal today by Gerard Baker that points out that the civilized world owes a great debt of gratitude to Israel to being the first bulwark against this savage attack against Western civilization. Your thoughts?
No, I totally agree. And I appreciated that thought piece in the Wall Street Journal. And indeed, instead of condemning Israel from the United States or having a wish-washy level of support, we should massively appreciate what they've done for the last year in fighting on the front lines where it is good versus evil, and they are on the good side, and they face evil every single day.
Well, any closing opinions?
I just think that Israel is showing.
General, just an ironic point here. You talk about how the most beneficial short-term target would be the oil facilities. I think back that under Trump, Iran's oil export capability had virtually collapsed because of the sanctions that were imposed. And now they are a major oil exporter, earning hundreds of billions of dollars because the Biden-Harris administration has eliminated essentially those sanctions. So to me, it's just ironic that Israel will have to do what they would not had to if Trump's sanctions against Iran had continued in place.
You're right. That max pressure on Iran under the Trump administration strangled their sources of revenue. and dried up their ability to support their proxies to the max extent possible. And now we're just seeing all of that come back alive. And the result is that Israel has to do something that the United States should have done long ago.
Well, General Teichert, thank you so much for coming on, and let's monitor the situation and see how things progress.
Call me back anytime. I always love talking to you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And right now, Rita, any other hot news today?
It's the top news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
Well, boy, is it a huge, huge news day. Tonight will mark the first and only vice presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. There's not going to be an audience, but there will be open microphones, and we will begin our great analysis, extended coverage on WABC starting at 8:30 p.m. Also, we've been talking about the attack, of course, by Iran on Israel. The White House says it appears that the attack has been defeated. No thanks really to the U.S. Iran launched nearly 200 missiles at Israel today. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the U.S. continues to work with Israel to assess the impact of Iran's attack. And also on Hurricane Helene, more than 130 deaths in the southeast are being blamed, and the number keeps rising. Nearly a third of the people were killed in Asheville, North Carolina. And everybody, after the break, we're going to be talking with Kari Lake, Senate candidate in Arizona, about, get this, non-citizens voting in Arizona. That's stunning.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. John, I understand we have Arizona Senate candidate Kari Lake joining us now.
Well, 35 days to the election. Kari Lake from the great state of Arizona, and she's running for the U.S. Senate. And a lot of problems in Arizona. Well, Kari Lake, welcome to New York. And tell us, there's a big problem in Arizona with a lot of undocumented or non-citizens voting. And the Arizona Supreme Court says, well, leave them on.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just a problem in New York or in Arizona. It's a problem in New York. It's a problem in every state. We're seeing the people who poured across the border, and they're moving their way into every state. But when it comes to voting, we have a real critical problem. 98,000 people that have not proved citizenship were just allowed to stay on the voter rolls. And guess what? Just today, we found out that there's another 218,000. So that makes it roughly about, help me with the math, about 300,000 people on our voter rolls who've been there for 16 years that have not proved citizenship. It really throws a lot of our past elections into flux. And what we need to do is make sure that everybody who is voting is a citizen. It's pretty simple.
Why? I mean, our Constitution says you have to be a citizen to vote. Why does this Arizona Supreme Court say leave them on?
Well, I mean, I think one of the problems is, and I'm going to be a little bit critical of the GOP, is that they looked at who these people were, and it looked like a lot of them were registered Republican. And I think the GOP, the chairwoman of the GOP, said, we don't want to disenfranchise Republicans. The problem is, I don't want to look at what you're registered as. I want to look at, are you a legal voter? And if that means we're losing people who are Republican and they're registered, or Democrat or independent, take all of where you're registered to vote, put that aside, and are you a legal voter? And we have to get down to that, and we have to be able to put our preferences aside. And I think my gut instinct is that the chairwoman of the GOP looked at that initial 98,000 and said a lot of them are Republicans and we don't want to disenfranchise them. But now the cartel lawyer, who was our Secretary of State, he's a former cartel lawyer, just came out and said, okay, now we have 218 additional people who do not have proof of citizenship. What's going to happen next? Is he going to say there's another 100,000, 500,000? Where do we draw the line? We need citizens-only voting.
Now, the important thing about this discussion, I want all our listeners to know, Last time, the last election, with all these problems, the last election, President Trump lost by 10,000 votes. You lost for about 15,000 votes?
17,000.
17,000 votes. Well, you know what that means? 98,000 is a lot. I mean, if you would have lost by 1 million votes, 98,000, nobody cares.
Right.
But that is a significant thing that could change elections. Doesn't the Supreme Court in Arizona realize that?
Boy, you're asking me to really throw them under the bus, and I think they need to be thrown under the bus. We need to have some courageous people, John. I ask the question, where are the courageous judges? Because we've had a lot of election lawsuits that have come forth, and we've proven that there's problems with our election. In President Trump's election in 2020, obviously at 3 a.m., there were a lot of things that happened. In our election in 2022, the machines didn't work. The ballots weren't printed right. Judges were not willing to take that courageous step and say something went wrong and we have to do something about it. Now we have 98,000. Today we had 218,000 more added. So we're talking 300,000 people that are on the voter rolls in Arizona who don't have proof of citizenship. We need a courageous judge who will stand up, put their neck out there and say, we got to stop this.
But don't the people in Arizona, I mean, what's the population of Arizona?
More than 7 million.
7 million people.
7.5 million.
In Arizona, 7.5, realize that you're a border state and there's criminals coming across the borders. There's
fentanyl,
fentanyl, drugs coming across the borders. And, I believe in immigration, but, you want good people to come across the borders, not people that are going to create a problem for other Americans.
Right. Well, we've talked before. You're an immigrant, right? Or your family?
I'm an immigrant. My father was 6 minutes late coming to 6 months late coming to America. Otherwise, I could have run for president.
We need you to run for mayor.
I did.
Okay. Well, my husband's mother is an immigrant. My family came here as immigrants. Most of us did at some point, whether it was currently or past generation. And I believe that the vast majority of Americans believe in legal immigration, but not illegal immigration. As a matter of fact, the people who are most horrified by what's happening right now are those who've come here legally. They went through the process. It's rigorous. It's expensive. And they're watching people pouring in illegally. We cannot continue along the lines. We have the cartels in control of our border in Arizona, totally in control. Something's got to give, and we need some courageous judges to stand up and do the right thing.
Well, Carrie Lake, I hope the Supreme Court of the United States takes it up and straightens out the balloting in Arizona. And good luck, and let's talk again real soon.
Sounds great. Thank you, John.
Wow, very interesting. And listen, that's a huge issue. Let's not forget also, Judge Weinberg, that remember, they were trying to pass the SAVE Act, which means that non-citizens cannot vote in a federal election.
Why is it so difficult to abide by the federal Constitution, which says that you have to be a citizen to vote in a federal election?
Let's not forget 198 Democrats voted that down.
Yeah, that's correct. 190 Democrats voted it down, that illegals, that you shouldn't look at that they're illegals or non-citizens. They should vote anyway. But I understand in Arizona, Governor Pataki in Arizona is unique.
Arizona's unique in that it has two different ballots. It has a federal ballot and a state ballot. They require proof of citizenship to register, but the federal government does not, so that they cannot require it in federal elections. And that what Carrie Lake was talking about were over 100,000 people only allowed to vote in state races. Because
but there could be confusion.
It's
and
total confusion.
Who knows what happens at the polls?
It's total confusion.
Who knows what happens at the polls?
The federal law says you just have to certify you're a citizen. Arizona's law says you have to prove you're a citizen. That's why they have to keep two different roles. It's ridiculous. And as Judge Weinberg said, just pass the SAFE Act and this goes away.
Yeah, it shouldn't be an issue. Yeah, and we have, by the way, I want to tell everybody, we got Paul Stone, CEO with Colonial Metals Group here, one of the great economic guys out there.
Give us your opinion on Arizona.
Well, my opinion on Arizona is, you have something that isn't straightforward. There's more moving parts than need to be, and that is the seed ground for confusion and disarray and uncertainty. And, there ought to be clarity in any election. Clarity.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any. By the way, tonight, I bet economic issues are going to be front and center at the debate.
I imagine there will, and I doubt there's going to be any great answers from the Walt side of the podium.
Yeah, that's for sure, based on his track record. And also, coming up, we have Norm Coleman, of course, the great former senator
senator
from
of Minnesota.
He knows Tim Walz well.
He knows Tim Walz well. Let's get an opinion. Look, he's one common sense guy, Senator Norm Coleman. And he was a New Yorker, born in Brooklyn. Sid Rosenberg's first cousin.
That's right. That's right. Wow. How fun is that?
Well, born
That's
in Brooklyn,
great.
He's got to be a great guy.
Yeah, he's got to be. I agree. I was born in Brooklyn too, Craig. I agree. And by the way, joining us now, you guys, we have Gordon Chang, the great China expert. His Twitter is Gordon G. Chang. And Gordon, you also have a brand new book out, which I am so thrilled. It's called Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. By the way, today is China's National Day. It's the 75th anniversary, 75 years of communist rule in China. So how appropriate that Tim Walz will be on the debate stage tonight?
Yes, certainly, because Tim Walz has very suspicious contacts with the Communist Party's United Front Work Department. That's the part of the party that subverts foreign governments. When he was taking high school students and exposing them to communist ideology in China, he had to have had the approval of the United Front Work Department. And he can't say that he was uninformed and naive because as governor of Minnesota, he has maintained continuous contact with the United Front Work Department. So this is a decades-long romance with the worst elements on the face of the earth.
You know, I want you to refresh everybody, Gordon Chang, because you know China so well. Tim Walz's love affair with China, so much so that his wedding anniversary is tied to Tiananmen Square, one of the most brutal crackdowns in world's history.
Yes, that really was weird. As we've seen in the Daily Caller reporting, though, that these contacts with the United Front Work Department have just been continuous. And, he can explain away, I was trying to memorialize the students who died on that night. Well, he can explain away a fact or two, but he can't explain away the pattern. And because he's going to be one heartbeat away from the Oval Office, he owes an explanation to the American people about why he's been supporting the United Front Work Department over the course of 3 decades. This is just elemental because we should not be electing a communist who could one day be president of the United States.
You just hit an interesting point, what you said before about him saying that he wanted to honor the freedom fighters, if you will, because those students were incredibly heroic during Tiananmen Square. It's interesting. He comes out with this is the first time I've heard that. He comes out with that hours before the debate. How convenient is that, Gordon?
Yeah, it certainly is, because I think he knows that he's in trouble over this because he cannot give an adequate explanation to the American people. I mean, if Harris gets elected president, we will not have a communist sympathizer and fellow traveler so close to the Resolute desk in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
And that should concern us because China, which has declared the United States to be its enemy, is pushing really hard against us. There's fentanyl, there's COVID, there's intellectual property theft, there's all sorts of things, including, by the way, Rita, meddling in our elections. So this is China just political warfare against us, and they'll have Tim Walz there leading the charge against the country that he will swear to protect.
Yeah, absolutely. Gordon Chang, Paul Stone is here, the CEO of Colonial Metals Group.
When it comes to considering the depth of the roots of someone, to me, the source of everything matters. When we look at Walz, like you are highlighting just how deep those sympathetic roots go with communism, and the idea of a massive oppressive government is his form of solution to all the ills in humanity today. How obnoxious is that?
Yes, and very recently he's commented about how socialism is just like being a good neighbor. Well, no, it isn't, because he has not explained the fundamental nature of socialism and, more importantly, how socialism has worked out in practice. When he talks about communists sort of sharing all of their assets and money and everyone is just lovey and happy, and that is just shows that he believes in this stuff. He does not believe in our country. So I don't believe, I think that his presence on the ticket just disqualifies the Democratic Party ticket. I wish that Kamala Harris had actually picked someone who loved America so we could have a real choice. But the American people don't really have that choice.
Yeah, and you're right. It speaks volumes who she picked as her number 2, and we'll see him in action in a few hours from now. Thank you, Gordon, so much.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gordon Chang.
Thank you, Gordon. Good luck on your new book.
You can reach Gordon Chang on his Twitter, up-to-the-minute news, at Gordon G. Chang.
He always has the best stuff.
And let's take a break, and we're going to come back with, Senator Norm Coleman, who was a U.S. Senator in Minnesota. He's the one that knows Tim Walz the best. And let's see what we can find out.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. Well, tonight, in a little bit of time, we are going to see J.D. Vance versus Tim Walz in the big vice presidential debate. And John, our next guest, knows Tim Walz.
Senator Norm Coleman, a Brooklynite, but he moved west.
Transplanted to the great state of Minnesota. Transplanted to the great state. But I can take, John, you can take the boy out of Brooklyn. You can't take Brooklyn out of the boy.
Absolutely. Senator, you lived in Minneapolis. Did you, Minnesota, and did you know this Tim Walz?
Of course, I know.
Give us a briefing to all the American people listening right now.
So it's really important that, when they picked him, they were saying, this is a guy with Midwestern roots, rural values. He's going to appeal to the working men and women in rural communities. Point of fact, he got 31% of the vote in the most rural district in Minnesota, congressional district. He got hammered in every rural congressional district. He is, I described him as Gavin Newsom in a flannel shirt and bad hair, less hair. I mean, he is way to the left. We're talking about a governor who has given sanctuary, city policies in terms of driver's licenses, health care, and free college tuition to illegal immigrants, making Minnesota a sanctuary state for trans surgery for kids. Went through a $18 billion surplus, cut through it in one legislative session, and by the way, then increased taxes $10 billion and increased the size of government 40%. And probably worse for I think the country saw during the George Floyd riots. He let Minneapolis burn down. He literally didn't call out the National Guard for 3 days. And why, John, and why, Rita? Because he was in sync with the protesters, with the rioters, with the arsonists. And so that's who you got. So, I mean, he is, if she's the most liberal member of the Senate, he may be the liberal governor of the governors. And so that's what you got, liberal and more liberal, and very dangerous for America.
Yeah, that's my question, Senator. It's great to talk to you again. I'm thinking of, too, like Americans who are watching this tonight. What do they need to know, and how big of a concern is it big picture for this country, and how different will this country look if it's a Kamala Harris, Tim Walz administration?
Well, can I tell you one place where we'll look, because we're talking about it tonight, and that's Israel. I mean, Israel under attack, Israel under fire. And I'm going to say it up front, August 30th, withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Iranian mullahs looked at that and they said this country is weak. Putin looked at that and said this country is weak. You wouldn't have the devastation and destruction that occurred on October 7th a year ago with Hamas. You wouldn't have Iran doing what they're doing now, hurling 180 missiles at Israel. And so I think Israel's very existence is at stake. And I say that I'm national chairman of the Republican Jewish Coalition. This is so close to my heart. Been to Israel a number of times since the tragedy of October 7th. And this is an administration that withheld weapons, that told Israel don't go into Rafah, that's trying to micromanage. They were telling them, ceasefire the day after October 7th. Now a ceasefire now. What's the response if someone comes in and kicks the heck out of you? What are you supposed to hold up your hands and walk away? And so you're going to have, God forbid, Harris Walz get in office, and Israel, it continues to be under siege, and America's just not going to be there to the degree it has to be. And so for those of us who care about the Jewish state, this election is literally life or death.
Yes, I think, the whole world is depending on the United States of America, Washington, D.C., to keep the whole world free. And unless, Craig Eaton, you were saying it, and Governor Patterson, you were saying it, that right now, if this election doesn't go correctly, and then we may lose this whole country.
This is the end of the world if this election doesn't go the right way. We've had generals on it that have talked about confrontations around the world. We've never had this many confrontations and wars around the world, ever.
Absolutely. Governor Pataki.
I feel bad talking in these apocalyptic terms. That's not my nature, But this is real. That's the place where we're at. And right now, by the way, John, the world's depending on Israel to stand up to Islamic terrorists.
They do have the courage,
right? But they can't. It is so critically important that the United States stand by its side and not be second guessing, not be holding out arms, not to have the Senate Majority Leader call for the replacement of the democratically elected Prime Minister of Israel. And so, we're
Joe Biden gave him a little bit of stuff, which was good, but I don't believe Harris would give him anything.
Well, and in part because we haven't said it, but who's ascendant to the Democrat Party today? It's the squad. It's Bernie Sanders. It's the left. They're the loudest voices. The kids on college campuses who are Jewish students facing an onslaught of anti-Semitism that I don't think we've seen in this country before. And you got this crowd talking about, well, those folks have a point. Yeah, their point is to want to kill the Jews. Their point is from the river to the sea. That's not a point that you and I and your listeners and Americans across the political spectrum really want to agree with. But that's whose voices are the loudest. That's whose voices being heard, and that's whose voices will prevail if Harris and Walz are successful on November 5th.
Absolutely. And you know what also is such a disgrace, Senator, too, is that as we're looking at Kamala Harris and Biden, they have been angrier at Israel than they have about Iran. If you listen to their statements, it is preposterous. Governor Pataki has a question for you.
Senator, it's not just about defense of the Jewish state in Israel. It's about Israel defending the values of all of Western society. This is good against evil. This is the rule of law and tolerance against intolerance and barbarism. So this is not just those who support the Jewish state's fight. It's all of our fight that if we believe in the rule of law and tolerance. So I thank you for leading the charge on that. My question is, Israel has a limited period of time. The election is 35 days away. If Harris and Walz get in, they may well put great restrictions on Israel's ability to react to something like the attack from Iran today. Do you think that would propel Israel now to engage in a counterattack, a response to the Iranian attack that could have significant consequences towards freedom in Iran?
First, Governor, there's great wisdom in both your statements. One, that Israel, they're protecting Western values. This is right and wrong. This is good and evil. And they're out there, protecting us. And so it's not just Israel against Hamas. This is values of good and evil. That's what's at play here. I would hate to kind of get into those hypotheticals because I fear that what you're saying is right. That Israel may be in a position, it would be in a position where they did not believe that they had the full support of the United States, that the voices of the squad and the others are going to prevail and kind of hold them back from being able to protect the Jewish state, that they'll need to do whatever they have to do in order to survive. And by the way, they will. They will. It is never again. Okay, we're not going down that route. They're not going to go meekly in the night. These Jews are going to fight. And so I hope and I pray that we don't get to that place. But both points you raise they're spot on. Hey, can I say one thing just about the debate about Tim Walz?
Absolutely.
Yep. For a second.
Yeah, please.
He's got a very short fuse. He's got a very short fuse. For somebody who's been in the public arena, he's kind of downplaying his expert a long time. I've watched him in debates. He doesn't like to be criticized. There's an arrogance about him that leads to a short fuse. And I hope that JD can light that fuse.
Yeah, let's hope so. And by the way, before we let you go, Senator, Happy New Year, too. Happy Rosh Hashanah. Many prayers to you. It's great to have you here. Thank you.
Always a joy. Thank you so much. Take care, Rita. Take care, John.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you. Boy, and what do we all stand for, guys?
Truth, justice, and the American way.
Janine Pirro here for Colonial Metals Group. Colonial Metals Group helps Americans protect their future with the most trusted store of wealth in human history. Physical gold and silver. If you're retiring or retired, go to colonialmetalsgroup.com/Pirro for your free Janine Pirro Colonial Metals Group Retirement Protection Kit, or call 800-965-8004. 800-965-8004 now to receive a free home safe and up to $7,500 in free silver.